So it's pretty obvious that disclosure has already started. We're in the middle of it right now. The interesting thing is what happens next. So you're going to start hearing these two words discussed a lot by insiders and people at the top. That is controlled disclosure versus catastrophic disclosure. And this is interesting. So controlled disclosure is basically meaning the people that are behind all this, that have the most information, can control it in a slow drip way to where they can just incrementally introduce the human population to all of these things that they figured out. A, we're not alone in the cosmos. B, everything we know about our history, our origins, our Genesis story, everything like that's probably false, and here's the new alternative version. You know, all these things are going to have to be slow drip because it causes what's called ontological shock, where you basically go into shock and freak out because everything you thought you knew is a lie or is wrong, and you have to wrap your head around the changing of your religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, all of your beliefs, So that's a big deal. And if your mind isn't right, you're not ready for that spiritually and psychologically, it can have a lot of bad ramifications, okay? Now, that leads us to what they call catastrophic disclosure. Catastrophic disclosure is if they're not able to slow drip this. Like say they, when I say they, you know who I mean, the people at the top that are behind all this, they want to take 10 to 20 years to slow drip all this stuff out. Hey, here's a picture of a weird looking civilization type thing on Mars. Oh, hey, look, here's a picture of a UFO. Oh, hey, maybe here's some biologics from a body, and just slow drip it, and get everyone acclimated and give people time to wrap their mind around it before they give them the next piece of the puzzle. That's slow drip disclosure. That's controlled disclosure. Slow drip, monitor. If people start freaking out, pull back, wait a little while, slow drip some more. Now, what happens if something happens and there's a collective just oh shit moment, and instead of them taking 10, 20 years to release this all, it happens like that, okay? And all of a sudden, everyone on Earth, it's crystal clear, we're not alone, and all that stuff I just talked about, the questioning of your religious beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, Genesis story, who are we, where are we, when are we, what is a human, what's out there, who created us, what's going on, all those things flood into the human psyche at one time. Now, that can cause all sorts of psychological issues. I don't think I need to explain that. If you're not mentally stable, all of that flood at one time, and then watching everything crumble around you, like watching, religious wars break out and riots and people stop going to work and all the things that happen. And on top of all that destruction and chaos in the world, you have to wrap your head around that we could be the byproduct of an extraterrestrial race or some sort of a alien human hybrid or chimpanzee hybrid, or who knows what they're going to tell us and what's the real story. My theories, but having to wrap your head around all that like instantly, and not having someone to go to for support because everybody's going to be scrambling and falling apart at the same time. Now that is part one of what causes catastrophic disclosure. Part two is the phenomenon's effects on people's psyche, okay? So there's something called like the hitchhiker effect, and there's also something called acquired savant syndrome. These are two things that happen to people that are in close proximity to the phenomenon. So there are two opposites. And this is what makes me think that maybe it's also just a reflection of your internal self, because acquired savant syndrome basically means you are in contact with the phenomenon in some way, some sort of close encounter, and all of a sudden you have these enhanced abilities, these psi abilities. You're telepathic, you have premonitions, you can see auras, you can speak different languages and play instruments and stuff like that you've never, you can do advanced mathematics and physics, right? This is amazing. You're basically like a fucking X-Men, right? You have, enhanced spiritual and psychic abilities just instantly, right? While that's hard to come to grips with and to manage, because sometimes it's overwhelming, it's a whole lot at once, that would be seen as a positive. We're enhancing the human, machine. Now, on the flip side of that, when we have these hitchhiker effects, it's usually negative. We've seen this with, Skinwalker Ranch. They wrote a book called Skinwalkers of the Pentagon, where literally people in the intelligence agencies were going out to Skinwalker Ranch, coming back home, and bringing paranormal effects with them. That was spreading like a virus. They were giving it to their kids, and the kids would go to school and transmit it to neighbors and friends at school and that kind of stuff. People were seeing werewolves. People were having all sorts of poltergeist and paranormal things happening in their houses. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying. So this is the flip side of the coin. So we see how with, close proximity to the phenomenon, you can have either these amazing, beautiful, magical effects, these enhancements to the human, spirit, or you can have these detrimental effects, like almost like a disease or a virus, causing basically like manifestations of internal fears and things like that. So you can see how moving forward, it's less about, oh, there's aliens out there and we're not alone in the cosmos. I think we're way past that. I think everyone knows that. It's more about, this is consciousness related. Like, this has to do as much with the human psyche and as much with consciousness in general as it does with the cosmos is huge and, law of averages. If you look at how many stars there are and planets around stars, and there's bound to be other civilizations. Yes, that's a given. We know that. But it's much deeper than that. That's what they're realizing with the phenomenon, is only a small part of the phenomenon is actually like nuts and bolts, flying saucers, and aliens. Most of it is these spiritual things, these paranormal things, these time things that don't really make any sense to us. There's so much behind the scenes. There's so much about this that's metaphysical, way beyond parts that are physical. And the fear with catastrophic disclosure is that all of this is going to happen at once. And instead of like it happening to small groups of people where we can kind of go and study them, they've labeled it Havana syndrome. We now think Havana syndrome is actually part of this phenomenon. We can study those people, we can isolate those people, we can medicate those people and help those people. But what if this happens to billions at once? That's the risk we take with a catastrophic disclosure. That's a risk we take if there's actually this. People say, why don't they just come land on the lawn and shake our hands and say hi? It's too much for the average human brain, the average human psyche, to handle the flood of not only emotions and, changing thoughts, but the physiological and psychological effects that happens at the same time can cause people to literally go crazy. And if that happens to 1 or 2 people, we can manage it. If it happens to 100, 200 people, we can manage it. If it happens to 1 million, we're in trouble. If it happens to 1 billion, no one knows what will happen. So when you see people talking about disclosure and people are rushing them and saying, hurry up, tell us what you know and all these things, maybe there's parts of this that we haven't really understood firmly enough, and that they know that there could be these very unwanted effects that could literally crumble society as we know it. Because I think we're way more fragile psychologically, mentally, and even spiritually and emotionally than most people realize. I think most people are hanging on by a thread. And if you just all of a sudden create this ontological shock, and on top of it, give them psychic abilities they've never had before, and on top of it, give them the ability to manifest their deepest, darkest fears, and on top of it, everything is crumbling around them, so there's no support groups, and there's nobody to come and rescue them and help them and stuff, and you do that to billions of people at once, that literally is the fear that we have right now with this catastrophic disclosure, that some sort of a mass showing, a mass event, a mass encounter could literally create this catastrophic series of this domino effect of events that would happen that we don't know how to manage. And it's possible that this is what happens to the great civilizations over time. They get to a point technologically and spiritually and consciously where the phenomenon wants to come and show itself and interact, and possibly it's too much and they crumble. There's nothing else that explains the fall of every great civilization on Earth that's usually linked with some sort of an encounter type thing. And there's lots of information that points to interaction between the phenomenon and the greatest civilizations on Earth, and then also the demise. And I don't think it's done purposely. I think maybe they're trying to figure out how to integrate in a way, how to, do this mass encounter in a way that does not destroy humanity and civilization. I think it starts up here. I'm going to start moving forward. I'm going to do more spiritual work. I'm going to start doing more like helping people get to know themselves, helping people accept themselves, helping people be comfortable with themselves, and helping people be, more spiritually in tune and consciously in tune, and elevate your states of consciousness to the point where no matter what happens, you're ready for it. I think that that's the most important thing moving forward, is not just say, hey, this is fun. It's like watching Independence Day. No. It's more like watching the second coming of Christ. You know what I mean? You have to be ready for it, because we don't know what's going to happen. So let's get our minds right, take care of one another, peace, love, happiness, all that fun stuff. And anyways, so that's just a quick rundown of the difference between disclosures. We're in the middle of disclosure, but is it going to be controlled or catastrophic? We'll find out. Much love. Have a beautiful day. Peace.